Dostoevsky stood before a firing squad at 28 years old. The rifles were raised, the order was given, and in those final seconds before what he believed was his death, something shattered inside him, something that would never heal. He saw the darkest corners of the human soul, and he never looked away. That mock execution was not the end, it was the beginning. Because what Dostoevsky carried out of that moment, what he dragged through 4 years of hard labor in a Siberian prison camp, surrounded by murderers, thieves, and the most broken men alive, was a question that still haunts us today. What makes a person evil? Not evil in the abstract, not evil in some fairy tale, but the real, breathing, living evil that hides inside ordinary people, inside you, inside me. Most writers flinch when they get close to this question. Dostoevsky walked straight into the fire, and what he found there is something you need to hear. The soul is healed by being with children. Even a man who mapped hell believed in innocence. Today, we descend into the mind of the greatest psychologist who ever held a pen. The Firing Squad. December 22nd, 1849, St. Petersburg, Russia. A group of young intellectuals is dragged into a public square. Among them, a 28-year-old writer named Fyodor Dostoevsky. His crime, attending a reading circle that discussed banned political texts. That was enough. The Tsar wanted to make an example. Death. The prisoners were blindfolded. The soldiers raised their rifles. Dostoevsky heard the click of the hammers, and in that infinite second his entire life compressed into a single thought, not a prayer, not regret, but pure, overwhelming awareness of being alive. Then the drums rolled, a messenger arrived. The execution was a staged performance, a psychological torture designed by the Tsar himself. The whole thing was a cruel theater of power. Some of the men standing beside Dostoevsky went permanently insane in that moment. Dostoevsky did not. Instead, something far stranger happened. He became obsessed with a question that would define his entire life's work. If a human being could engineer that kind of cruelty, what else lurks inside us? That question sent him to the darkest places a mind can go, and what he found there would change literature forever. But first, he had to survive Siberia. House of the Dead. 4 years, that is how long Dostoevsky spent in a Siberian labor camp, shackled at the ankles, sleeping beside murderers and rapists. Most writers would have broken, most did. But Dostoevsky did something no intellectual had ever done before. He watched, he listened. He studied the men around him with the precision of a surgeon examining a wound. He became a student of the human soul in its most degraded state. And what he discovered terrified him. The most violent criminals were not monsters, they were men. Men who laughed, who cried, who loved their mothers, who told jokes around the fire at night. The degree of civilization in a society can be judged by entering its prisons. This was his first great revelation about evil. It does not come from some alien place outside of us. It grows in the same soil as kindness. The murderer who beat a man to death on Monday would share his last bread with a stranger on Tuesday, if Dostoevsky's understanding of evil is resonating with something deep inside you. Hit like and subscribe to keep exploring the depths of human darkness with me. Because what he discovered next is even more disturbing. The evil was not separate from the good. They were tangled together, inseparable, like roots of the same tree. The underground. In 1864, Dostoevsky published a short novel that nobody was ready for, Notes from Underground. The narrator is not a hero. He is not a villain. He is something far more uncomfortable. He is you. The underground man is petty, he is spiteful, he deliberately sabotages his own happiness. He knows what is good for him and chooses the opposite, not because he is stupid, but because he can. Freedom to choose destruction. This was Dostoevsky's second great insight into evil. Human beings do not always act in their own self-interest. We are not rational machines. We will burn down our own house just to prove that we are free. Think about it. How many times have you done something you knew was wrong, not because you had to, but because some dark corner of you wanted to? We sabotage ourselves to feel the power of free will. The underground man was a bomb thrown at every philosopher who believed humans could be perfected through reason and education. Dostoevsky was saying something terrifying. Man is sometimes extraordinarily, passionately in love with suffering. We choose suffering, we choose chaos, not because we are broken, but because choosing is the one thing that makes us feel alive, and this leads us to his darkest creation. Raskolnikov's Acts. Crime and Punishment, 1866. A young man named Raskolnikov has an idea, a brilliant, logical, perfectly rational idea. Some people are extraordinary, and the rules do not apply to them. He is poor, he is desperate. There is an old pawnbroker who is cruel and useless to society. If he kills her, he can take her money and use it to do great things. The math is simple. One worthless life traded for the future greatness of an extraordinary mind. Napoleon would have done it without hesitation. So Raskolnikov picks up an axe, and he does it. Murder. But here is where Dostoevsky's genius reveals itself. The murder is not the point. The murder happens early in the book. What comes after is the real horror, because Raskolnikov discovers that killing another human being does not make you extraordinary. It tears something fundamental out of your soul that you can never put back. The guilt does not come from the law. The police are barely present. The guilt comes from inside. It eats him alive like acid-dissolving metal. Guilt eats the soul alive. Dostoevsky was warning us. The most dangerous evil is not committed by monsters. It is committed by intelligent people who convince themselves they are above morality, and that warning has never been more relevant than right now. God is dead now. 20 years before Nietzsche declared God is dead, Dostoevsky was already exploring what that would mean, and his conclusion was far darker than Nietzsche's. If God does not exist, everything is permitted. This line from the brothers Karamazov is perhaps the most important sentence in all of modern literature, because Dostoevsky was not making a theological argument, he was making a psychological one. He was asking what happens to the human soul when it loses its moral anchor, not to society, not to civilization, to the individual standing alone in the dark with no one watching. No God, no rules, no limit. Look around you right now. We live in Dostoevsky's prophecy, a world where millions of people have decided there is no ultimate moral authority, and what has happened, exactly what he predicted, not mass chaos in the streets, something subtler, something worse. People became their own gods with the morality of convenience. We pick and choose our ethics like items from a menu. We justify anything if it serves us. The individual becomes king, and the king answers to no one. But Dostoevsky saw something even deeper hiding behind this crisis. The Grand Inquisitor. Inside the brothers Karamazov, there is a story within a story, a parable so powerful that philosophers have been arguing about it for over 100 years. The Grand Inquisitor. The most dangerous chapter ever written about freedom and power. The premise is simple. Jesus returns to earth during the Spanish Inquisition. He performs miracles, he heals the sick, and the Grand Inquisitor, the most powerful cardinal in the church, has him arrested, not because he does not believe, but because Jesus is dangerous. The Inquisitor tells Jesus to his face that humanity does not want freedom. Freedom is a burden too heavy for human beings to carry. People want bread, they want miracles, they want authority. They want someone to tell them what to do and what to believe. We have corrected your work. We have founded it upon miracle, mystery, and authority. Think about how this plays out in your own life. How often do you surrender your freedom to someone who promises certainty, a political leader, a guru, an algorithm that tells you what to think? We trade our freedom for the comfort of not having to choose. Dostoevsky understood that evil does not always look like violence. Sometimes it looks like a warm hand offering to carry your burden, and that brings us to the most personal question of all. The double self. Every single character Dostoevsky created carries a war inside them, not between good and evil, between two versions of themselves. The self they show to the world, and the self that whispers in the dark. Light self vs. dark self. In his early novella The Double, a man meets an exact copy of himself. But this copy is everything he is afraid to be. Bold, reckless, free from shame. The copy begins taking over his life, and the original slowly goes insane. This was not just a story. This was Dostoevsky mapping the architecture of the human psyche decades before Freud and Jung. He understood that we are not one person, we are a battlefield. Every human being is a civil war between who they are and who they pretend to be. And the evil that Dostoevsky wrote about was not the violence of strangers. It was the violence we do to ourselves, the lies we tell, the parts of ourselves we bury alive, the desires we deny until they rot and become something poisonous. Jung would later call this the shadow. Dostoevsky called it being human. Every man has reminiscences which he would not tell to everyone, but only to his friends. But if evil lives inside all of us, is redemption even possible? Dostoevsky had an answer. Suffering redeems. Here is what separates Dostoevsky from every other writer who explored evil. He did not stop at the darkness, he walked through it. Redemption. In Crime and Punishment, Raskolnikov does not escape his guilt. He surrenders to it, he confesses. He goes to Siberia, and there, through suffering, through love, through the simple faith of a woman named Sonia, he begins the slow, painful process of becoming human again. Dostoevsky believed that suffering is the only path to genuine transformation. Not suffering for its own sake, not the masochistic worship of pain, but the kind of suffering that comes when you finally stop lying to yourself, when you look at who you really are, all of it, the beautiful and the grotesque, and you accept it. Pain and suffering are always inevitable for a large intelligence and a deep heart. This is the part that modern culture gets wrong. We are told to eliminate suffering, medicate it, distract ourselves from it. Dostoevsky would say that is the most dangerous thing you can do. Avoid suffering and you avoid growth. Because a person who has never suffered has never been tested, and a person who has never been tested does not know what they are capable of, both the good and the evil. But Dostoevsky's deepest insight about evil was not about individuals at all. Prophetic vision. In 1872, Dostoevsky published a novel called Demons. It was about a group of radical revolutionaries who believe they can create a perfect society by tearing the old one down. They start with ideas and end with murder. The book was mocked when it came out. Critics called it paranoid, exaggerated. Then the 20th century happened. 1. The Russian Revolution killed millions in pursuit of utopia. 2. The Nazi regime used rational ideology to justify genocide. 3. The Cultural Revolution destroyed lives for ideological purity. 4. Cambodia's Khmer Rouge emptied cities in the name of progress. Every single one of these horrors was committed by people who believed they were doing good. People who had a vision of a perfect world and decided that anyone who stood in the way was expendable. The road to hell is paved with the certainty that you are building heaven. Dostoevsky predicted all of it, not because he was a prophet, but because he understood the fundamental truth about evil. It does not come from ignorance. It comes from the absolute certainty that you are right, and once you are certain you are right, anything becomes justifiable. This brings us to his final and most devastating lesson. Evil within us. So what did Dostoevsky ultimately understand about evil that nobody else did? Evil is not a force outside of us. It is the price of being free. Every human being has the capacity for extraordinary kindness and extraordinary cruelty. The same hands that hold a child can destroy a life. The same mind that creates art can engineer horror, and the only thing standing between the two is a choice. A daily, exhausting, never-ending choice. Choose every single day. Dostoevsky did not believe in easy answers. He did not believe evil could be educated away or legislated out of existence. He believed it was woven into the fabric of human freedom itself. To be free means to be capable of both the highest good and the deepest evil. And that is precisely what makes his work so important right now. In an age where everyone is pointing fingers, blaming systems, blaming algorithms, blaming the other side, Dostoevsky grabs you by the collar and forces you to look in the mirror. Above all, don't lie to yourself. The man who lies to himself and listens to his own lie comes to a point that he cannot distinguish the truth within him. The evil you fear in the world begins with the lies you tell yourself. That is the message. That is the warning. That is the gift of a man who stared into the abyss and came back to tell us what he saw. Dostoevsky spent his entire life wrestling with the darkest question any human being can face. Not whether evil exists, but whether it exists inside us. And his answer was yes. Unflinchingly, devastatingly yes. But here is the part most people miss. That was not his final word. His final word was love, messy, imperfect, stubborn love. The love of Sonia kneeling beside a murderer. The love of Alyosha embracing his broken brothers. The love that does not pretend the darkness is not there, but chooses to light a candle anyway. Darkness is real, but so is light. You carry both inside you right now, the capacity for cruelty and the capacity for compassion. Dostoevsky's gift was not to make you feel guilty about the darkness, it was to make you aware of it, because once you are aware you can choose, and the choice is everything. If you made it this far, comment underground to prove you have looked into the abyss with us today. Beauty will save the world. The wisdom of the ages is yours, use it well. If this unlocks something in you, subscribe for more. The vault has more wisdom waiting.